In 2025, some of you may still be stuck in the same habits, getting stuck into doing 30-day challenges, doom scrolling drum videos, wondering what it really takes to get to the next level. But what about if you could harness the power of showing up daily, knowing that you were on the right path? It's surprising how small, consistent 1% improvements make the biggest difference over time. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this video. So, are you ready? Let's drum. If you're new here, I'm Harry. I'm a drum teacher based in Bristol, and in this video I'm going to show you the 5 micro habits in drumming and explain why they are vital for becoming an unstoppable drummer in 2025. The 5 micro habits I'll explore with you are the objective mindset, reflective practice, time blocking, being indistractable, and finally, dose effects. The first thing that I want to say is that you are not alone in this, because we all go through the similar challenges along the way with staying productive and really getting the most out of our practice sessions, especially when life gets in the way. Some of the most common struggles that drummers face, including myself, are 1. Time management and motivation, 2. Not having a clear practice plan, 3. Overcoming distractions, 4. Dealing with noise limitations, 5. Physical and mental fatigue, 6. Practicing alone too often. And if you relate to the last one, I've got a new drumming community that will help you engage with other drummers, stay inspired and accountable, and also learn and take courses amongst many other things. If that sounds interesting for you and you're a beginner drummer, I've got a waitlist at the top of my description, so head down below and join the waitlist. I want to briefly share a problem that I've always had with you, and the problem that I tend to have is that I just can't get away from the drum kit. I definitely find it really hard to get off the drum kit sometimes, and I have to force myself to actually get outside, go for a walk, or just do something completely different. And I really need to do that more, because if I stay at the drum kit too long, then it's just not good generally, and maybe not as productive. If you've got a problem that you'd like to share, head down to the comments, say what your problem is, and also how you're working on it for everyone else to see. The first micro habit is the objective mindset. How to avoid analysis paralysis. This common mental trap that often traps drummers and musicians and people alike back from making real progress, and it's called analysis paralysis. But the question is, what is analysis paralysis? Well, it happens when you overthink every little detail. This can cause hesitation, frustration, and even avoidance of the task itself. So instead of taking action, you get yourself stuck in a loop. Maybe you get stuck in self-doubt or questioning if you're doing the right thing at all. The result? No action equals no progress. This is especially dangerous for drummers because the progress comes from doing, not just thinking. So the question is, how do you escape the cycle? The first thing we can do is avoid the perspective mindset. Or in other words, you get stuck in first person mode. This is something I developed for myself to help me when I was practicing and to avoid over criticizing myself. Essentially what this is that you get stuck in your head too much, and so you're constantly evaluating and analyzing every single movement in real time, which causes you to get stuck in this first person mode. What this leads to is a loss of perspective, and this can create a few things. First of all, it can create self-doubt, so you can often feel bad about what you're playing and you can only just see your mistakes. Another thing is just inefficiency. Just waste time, just overthinking instead of getting on with practicing solutions. And another thing is just frustration. You just convince yourself that you're not progressing at all, when in reality, you probably are. So in order to break out of this, you need to step outside and observe from a fresh perspective. This is where the shift really begins, and you shift into step 2, which is shifting into the objective mindset. So instead of obsessing in the moment, what you can do is document your playing and analyze it objectively afterwards. The process that I came up with is the SAR method, which is shoot, analyze, and reproduce. Let's go over S, which is shoot. In other words, record yourself. This essentially means to capture full takes of what it is that you want to practice. It's key here that you practice the full thing that you want to practice, not the actual practice itself. Something that you can do quite easily is just get your phone out and just simply record yourself, and record yourself in a way that the audio is captured at its best. Something that I do is just record myself on the electronic drums without any sound. What that means is that I get the raw footage, or the raw sound, if you like, meaning that I can really hear every single detail. Moving on to A, which stands for analyze. In other words, you step back and review the footage. You can watch yourself as if you're your own coach. What this does is puts you into the objective mindset. So what would you ask yourself? You could say, well, what's working? What small adjustments can you make? These things help you to focus on these improvements, not the mistakes. So coaching yourself is a really great mindset to help you make solutions. And this leads on to R, which is to reproduce and make intentional adjustments. Well, this basically means that you take what you've learned and you apply it to the next session, or you apply it there and then if you've got enough time. What you do is you work on one thing at a time. So you can write down everything that you noticed, and you can tick them off every time you feel like or know that you've created the solution. Then you can take each problem and fix it one at a time. What I like to do is write everything down and tick them off as I go. This helps me to feel confident in my abilities, and it also just helps me to know what I've done. And after that, it's pretty simple. All you have to do is just repeat the process. Record, analyze, and improve. Overall, this process keeps you in the objective mode, not perspective mode, and it makes you a problem solver instead of being a perfectionist. The three main key takeaways are: thinking too much while playing can lead to analysis paralysis. Recording yourself removes bias and gives you clarity. And finally, objectivity leads to fast improvements than endless overthinking. So next time you feel stuck, step outside of yourself. Record, review, refine. That's where the real progress happens. The second micro habit for you in 2025 is engage in reflective practice. There is strong psychological evidence supporting the effectiveness of keeping, you know what it is? A practice diary. Keeping a practice diary is really great for just skill improvement, learning, and performance enhancement. Research from cognitive psychology, educational psychology, and neuroscience highlights several key benefits. One such example was based on the key concept that reflecting on practice helps adjust strategies and improve performance. And this was conducted by a man called Donald John in 1983. Some of the benefits of reflective practice are increased self-awareness, a deeper understanding of your strengths, weaknesses, values, and goals, continuous learning and development, uncovering new insights and innovative solutions, and also breaking free from routine and embracing new opportunities. From my own experience, keeping a practice diary has been really pivotal, mainly because on the first day, I would write down before I practice what I'm going to do, and I would make notes of how it went. I would write how I felt. I write underneath each one things that I could have improved. And then on the next page, I'll write what I'm going to do the day after. This means that it takes out any guesswork, and I know exactly before I do, I know what I'm going to do, if that makes sense. Sorry, riffing then. What this really did was help me for continuous learning and development. It meant that each day I was just going little by little, and it just meant that I felt really good about my practice overall. And it really lends to the 1% gains idea, where each day you just make 1% improvement and that accumulates over time. It also helps you to identify anything that isn't working and things that are also working. So it helps you to adjust your routine on a daily basis. It also means that you can look at it and see what else you could learn. Maybe there's a slot where you've decided, actually, I don't want to learn that thing quite yet because it's a bit too hard. I'll bring this song which sounds a little bit easier and could be more fun. So overall, it's just like an awesome thing to do. Very simple, very effective, almost too easy not to do. And some of the things you can gain along the way are these mini morale boosts. And what they do is help you to build confidence, improve your capabilities for goal setting, also help your memory retention because you're doing it on a daily basis, so you can start to remember what you're doing. Also helps mood self-regulation, basically like you just feel good about what you're doing, and consistency. If you have something in front of you, something physical, and you're working on it, it just helps to build that consistency over time. So in conclusion, a practice diary is a super powerful tool, so powerful that it's like almost illegal not to do it. And of course, supported by a plethora of psychological research as well. So get your practice diary and start making those notes. The third micro step is time block your ideal week. Calendar blocking, also known as time blocking, is a super powerful productivity technique that is pretty common nowadays, especially with productivity YouTubers. And this involves scheduling specific blocks out of your day for different tasks or activities. So instead of leaving the whole day open-ended and reactive, this method ensures that you essentially get all the important activities done to a designated time slot, which makes it more likely for you to get it done. One of the key psychological principles supporting this is something called Parkinson's law, which states, quote unquote, work expands to fill the time available for its completion. This means that if you give yourself an entire day to complete a task, it will take the entire day, even if you could have done it in an hour. So by intentionally setting time constraints, you counteract procrastination and inefficiencies, which helps you to create urgency and focus. So when it comes to learning an instrument, consistency is far more powerful than random bursts of long or random practice sessions. So if you don't schedule dedicated practice time, it's pretty easy just to let other tasks get in the way, which can leave you feeling stuck and just inconsistent. So that's why blocking out practice sessions in advance is one of the best ways to stay on track with your goals. So a great way to start is to get a blank calendar and start mapping out your ideal practice schedule. So one that fits your week realistically. So this isn't about perfection to begin with or at all. It's about creating a habit-friendly framework that makes you show up without any effort. So here's 3 suggestions to guide you. The first suggestion is to block out the days and times you can realistically commit to practicing. So I'd start off with blocking out all the time that you have to commit to. For example, if you've got a 9-to-5 job, then make sure that's all blocks out. Or if you're a freelancer, make sure that the times that you know are stuck in your calendar, make sure they're blanks out into a certain color. Once you've blocked out the times and days which you have to commit to certain things, you can then start to draft in some ideas for when you might like to practice. I would consider doing it at a time when you're going to be most focused. In other words, you're not going to be too tired to practice. Suggestion 2 is to create a structured plan for each session. So this may take a couple of weeks just to get sorted and find the right sort of structure for you, but ultimately you have to test in to begin with. So an example for someone who works 9 to 5, assuming you might practice on a daily basis, is that on Mondays you might specifically focus on technique. Tuesdays could be dedicated to learning the song. Wednesday could be learning groove and fills. Thursday could be a little checkpoint where you take one of those aspects and just go a little bit deeper. Friday could just be a little fun little jam with other people. And the weekend can be focused on some of the aspects which you didn't have much time to get into. So I suggest picking 2 or 4 things so you can split them evenly over Saturday and Sunday. And the third suggestion is that once you've gone into your calendar and you've blocked everything out, is to respect your time blocks like appointments, like a dentist appointment or a doctor's appointment. You gotta stick to it, otherwise it's no point in doing it in the first place. So I'm going to briefly walk you through an ideal week that looks like for me in 2025. So at this moment in time, as you can see on the screen, I've picked a random week in February 2025. I've already put some blocks in already, and I've already done some color coding. You could do color coding for each of the practice sessions. So I've done orange here, then I've done purple here, and then red here, and then also red there. I could also change it to yellow or something like that. Then I've included the hours that I'm also teaching. So on Wednesday to Thursdays, I know that I can't, that's when I teach. And I've just left the other ones blank for now just because I'm doing other stuff, but this is just a general idea. I've also got things like office hours. So these office hours are when I can't really practice, or when practicing is actually just going to be too much. And actually that's not practice, that's actually teaching on Tuesdays, because I can't really practice on Tuesdays or Thursdays. Mainly because I'm just too busy in the mornings. I'm just doing stuff, including traveling. Get rid of that. I've also got some teaching here as well. underneath, 2:45, 3 to 7 p.m. And yeah, this is just a rough idea of what I've currently got. I mean, at the moment, I've got, teaching during the day, but sporadically. So then I would just like block it out. So I'd probably just do that. And let's say I've got teaching here and I've got teaching here and I've got a bit of work in the morning. So as a freelancer, my time is different. And hence why I've got practice sessions that last for a longer period of time. The reason is because that's the time I've got to practice. So I want to make my practice sessions longer. Also, the second benefit to having a longer practice session for me personally is that I get to take my time. For some people, at the very beginning of their practice journey, doing half an hour is absolutely fine. But for me, I like to do a minimum of 2 hours because it gives me time to warm up, gives me time to like level things out, gives me time to get deep into what I really want to get into. Otherwise, I feel like if I'm doing something, then I just feel like I'm crashing it if it's within an hour. So yeah, it has to be at least 2 hours. If it's not 2 hours, or if I'm doing something and I know I'm going to be tired, then I just don't do it at all. So this is just to give you a rough idea of what you could do. It can be very, very, very basic. It doesn't have to be freaking productivity genius here. You just have to block out the time which you know you have. And just to bring up a point, probably questioning why my practice sessions so long. And just note, I'm not practicing for all this time. This is just like me blocking out the time for when I do practice. Sometimes I might go get something to eat in between. Sometimes I'll take a bit of a break, but I like to practice for a longer period of time, mainly because I can take my time. So it means I can practice for all this time. Actually, the actual amount of time I practice is probably less than, let's say on Monday, I don't do 6 hours of pure practice. It's actually less than that. But it allows me to have full concentration, allows me to not seize up or get too tense, allows me to get enough done so that during the week when I don't have time to practice, that I know that I'm sort of caught up on everything that I want to be caught up on. So time blocking, as I mentioned, has super powerful effects. It can allow you to take control of your schedule, and it comes with plenty of benefits, including reducing decision fatigue, helps you build consistency, helps you maximize focus, and helps you to improve efficiency. So instead of leaving practice to chance, plan your ideal week and make your growth intentional. And if you remember anything, remember this: block it in, show up, and get better. The fourth micro step is to be indistractable. And in today's fast-paced world, staying focused can literally be a challenge. All those notifications can literally be at the end of your practice session. And I borrowed this concept from this book, Indistractable by Nir Eyal. The title is Indistractable: How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life. So I've borrowed some of the ideas, and we can adopt some of the strategies from this book to enhance our concentration and productivity. This book essentially delves into the psychology of distraction, offering actionable methods to regain control over our intention. So there are 3 strategies that I've taken from this book and adapted to drummers. The first strategy is to track your external triggers. There's a quote I want to take from a podcast that the author was on, and it was the Ali Dal podcast. Shout out Ali. And the quote is, "A mistake repeated more than once is a decision." So to avoid making unwanted decisions, you can keep a distraction journal so you can be better identifying external distractions. An example of an external distraction is a notification. So one thing you can do is to put your phone on airplane mode so you can eliminate that distraction altogether. Before I move on to the second strategy, yes, I have changed the camera to my fiance's because mine died and I love this camera. Please hit the subscribe button so I can buy a lovely camera like this. It's amazing. I feel so professional. Anyway, move on to strategy number 2, internal trigger awareness. This one's a little harder to notice than external triggers for obvious reasons, but trying to recognize feelings like boredom or frustration that lead to distraction or just stopping altogether is a lot better than not at all. So these motions are best known when they are understood, so you can better address them directly instead of turning to unrelated activities. A practical example for drummers is to ask yourself a question. The question is, what do I do when I feel like X? What I do for me is I would ask, what do I do when I feel frustrated or when I feel angry? One thing that I used to do was to hit the ground or punch a pillow, because I would get very frustrated. I'm not afraid to admit that. So what I learned when this happened was that it would be better for me to go out for a walk to regain mental clarity. And then I would be in a better position to come back later in the day and try it again, or come back the next day if the day was just too much. So by doing this, you're in control because you're identifying what you can do to make a change. The final strategy that I've learned from this Indistractable book is the power of making a commitment pact. So making a pact with yourself is, again, really powerful. So when you think about it, humans don't really have a lot of control over our own urges. When we're hungry, might get hangry, but we can decide how we respond to an urge. A practical example of what we can do in response to an urge is to put up a do not disturb sign on the practice room. This means that you're making a pact to yourself. You're saying that this is focused practice time and this should not be disturbed, not by anyone reading the sign, and also shouldn't be broken by you. So by implementing these 3 strategies, you can already cultivate an environment conducive to deep focus, leading to more effective and enjoyable practice sessions. And if you want to read the book, which I highly recommend, then there'll be a link in the description. The 5th and final micro habit for you today is the dose effect. Again, learned from this book, the dose effect. Small habits to boost your brain chemistry. The dose effect is borrowed from the neuroscientist T.J. Power, whose book is all about resetting the balance of the brain chemistry, with simple everyday habits leading to a happier and more productive life. In this chapter, I'll be focusing just on letter D, which is dopamine, and overviewing 2 out of the 5 chapters within dopamine section. So the 2 chapters that were in the dopamine section are flow state and phone fasting. By the very nature of playing an instrument, you are more likely to enter a state of flow. And I for sure find this every time that I play once I get into it. The key though is knowing that it takes about 15 minutes to enter that flow state. So it's really critical that the first 15 minutes of practice are distraction free. In any case, it's still important to know a few things you can do to enhance your first 15 minutes on the drum kit. There are 3 things you can do to help eliminate distraction. The first thing is that you can set a specific task. Now this means being specific about what you are going to practice, rather than just saying, I will just practice the drums, because that's very vague. So if you're practicing technique, do that. If you're practicing a groove from a song, do that. Whatever it is, pick something and stick to it. Second thing you can do is tell someone. This lends to the idea of being indistractable, where you essentially make a pact to someone and to yourself. So if you live with someone, tell them you're going to practice and when you're going to practice. So I always tell my fiance when I'm going to practice, literally because I hate being disturbed. Like if I'm in the middle of a practice session and I'm like in the zone and I get pulled out of that zone, it's like I have to start all over again. And it takes me a little while to get back into it. So she knows not to come in, and I also know not to go into the room whenever she's focusing on something as well. The third point is to eliminate distraction. So the drum kit is known to be associated with being loud. That's if you're playing it loud. Obviously by itself, it's pretty quiet. Anyway, if it distracts others, they could distract you too. And I've also been distracted when people say, you're playing too loud. Like, all right, sorry, hard. So the best of both worlds is to practice on electronic kit or practice kit. So essentially you can practice anytime you want, and you can avoid people come knocking over the door telling you to be quiet. And also for me, it helps me to stop feeling like there's someone watching me. So yeah, it's the best of both worlds to try and eliminate distraction from other people who may disturb you. The second strategy is phone fasting. Phone fasting is essentially about creating boundaries for when you want to engage with your phone and understanding when you don't want to. Applied to practice an instrument, you might be addicted to reaching for your phone during your practice breaks, which basically means that you don't really have a true break, like going out for a walk. You just end up scrolling something, which is something that I have done, and you just feel really horrible afterwards because your mind just feels really slushy. So the solution was to create the rule that when I practice, I don't touch my phone. So one way I regulate this is setting up a timer that lets me know that when it's time to put my phone elsewhere. And when it's time for me to have a break from practicing, I turn it off, and that's when I do something like reading a book. The solution for me was to create a rule that when I practice, I don't have my phone in the room and I have it turned off. This basically creates a friction because there's a barrier for me to even put it on. And then it also means that when I do want to use it, there has to be a very good reason for me to use it. I can't just be like, I want to go on this app for like 10 seconds. No, it has to be a very, 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 very good reason. So simply turning it off is the key way that I regulate myself so I don't feel the urge to go and pick up the phone. And something I do when I am having a break is that I still keep it off, but I might go and read a book, or I might go outside, or do something which is beneficial for my brain and doesn't mean that I'm going to feel slushy afterwards. But the question is, what about if you use your device for practice? Well, I use an iPad for practice, and what I do is I create what I call a phone environment. And this really is really effective because you just have the apps on the device that you're only going to use. So you don't have any distracting apps. So my iPad is literally for work purposes and for practice purposes only, which basically means I don't have to do anything. But if you're using a device which has apps like YouTube or TikTok, whatever you use, what you can do is take the apps off the phone just by simply hiding them. It just means that you have to swipe them and actually search for them for when you really want to search for them. At least this is the idea. So you have to work with it a little bit. You can't just be like, I'm going to search it every time and get into a habit of searching it. You really just want to find a way that helps you to increase the friction between you and the apps that you tend to use. The thing about all of this is that all the things I mentioned aren't really the key thing. There's one thing that if you don't do, then everything else that I've mentioned just falls apart. And without it, you'll never truly reach your full potential. And it's not as simple as flipping a switch. It takes hyper-focused awareness and deliberate action. The words that I've used a few times, you may have noticed, is intentions. Intentions are the invisible force behind everything that you do. They separate mindless repetition from purpose-driven improvement. They are literally the reason some drummers keep progressing while others may stay stuck, no matter how many hours they put in. And here's the truth, most drummers aren't even doing this. Like even my own students often overlook it. And that's why I teach them the TPIA methods, even though it's not really a sexy name, but it is a simple yet powerful framework that ensures they get the most out of every practice session. The TPIA is the Intentional Practice Framework. It stands for task, play, intention, and action. The T stands for task, which means to set a clear focus for your practice session. The question I'd ask is, what needs improvement specifically? This could mean that you'll want to refine a tricky patch of music, and one of my students at the moment is learning Flowers by Miley Cyrus. And this is one of the key things that we work on in our practice sessions. And then we move on to something else, for example. P stands for play. And it means to perform once with full attention. And this is the place where you identify exactly where the issue lies. I stands for intention. Now this is a point where you set your intention. For example, you might say, I will focus on this specific area and make targeted improvements. For example, with one section of the Flowers, my student was having a problem with getting his hands up to do a little hi-hat variation. That was a specific area we knew we could work on and isolate. And A stands for action, which means to follow through. In other words, you execute your intention with precision and commitment. And essentially you'll cycle that through until you get this targeted aspect of your playing more accurate, and it just feels a lot easier. The TPIA method is a really, really great method that I use for all of my students. Helps to shift their mindset from mindless repetition, getting stuck in a cycle, to intentional practice that accelerates their progress. So all of a sudden, you're not just going through the motions, you're actually taking control of your growth, and you're also, in the immediate term, your practice sessions. With intention, this is where the real transformation happens. This is how you go from practicing for hours and hours, seeing little change, to practicing with purpose and unlocking exponential improvement. So next time you sit down to practice, ask yourself, what's my intention? Because without it, you're just playing. With it, you're growing. So I'd like to know, what's one transformative habit you'll be working on in 2025? Could be one of the 5 micro habits you learned about in this video. Maybe it's something completely different. Whatever it is, feel free to share the transformative habit you'll be working on in 2025 in the comments. Finally, if you haven't already, be sure to check out my new drumming community designed for beginners, completely free to join. It's not yet open, but there is a waiting list in the description, so head down below to join the waitlist now and be updated for when it goes live. Thanks very much for watching. With gratitude, Harry.